Over and over again, our clients tell us, we appreciate that you're catching 70–80% of the troubles, the events, and the incidents, and remediating them, fixing them enough in as many cases as possible, and even escalating to vendors, telecom providers, etc., to make sure the problem's fixed. Goal is your staff should be in the boardroom instead of the basement, working on strategic initiatives. And at the same time you help do this, the end users demand a better experience, IT service quality improvements. This is just a little more detail on the services that NetEnrich and TerraGuy bring to your operations. We mentioned the people, they work around the clock, they don't sleep, so you can. The technology centers on an automation platform that provides the wall-to-wall visibility, conquer the complexity, helps you provide unified report. So you don't have to talk to each one of the technology silos and then spend a lot of time integrating reports in case your boss asks, how is IT doing? And then the process includes tools integration. You don't have to rip and replace anything. We can integrate any tools you have for monitoring. I'm going to pass the ball to Wes now, who is one of our senior engineers. Wes is going to share a little bit of detail on our solution.
Thanks, Derek.
Okay, I trust you.
I am sharing slides. Derek, can you see my slides?
Derek, you need.
Oh, Wes.
Wes, you're going to need to share your screen with the audience.
Yeah, I was confirming to see if you were seeing it. Give me just a moment.
I'll let you know when we can see it. Now,
right.
Here it comes.
Can you see it? All right. So what we're going to talk today about, and have about 3 or 4 slides, is to talk to what we refer to as our Enterprise Command Center, and how it allows us to be able to deliver that bimodal IT that Derek was just describing. There's and we're going to, on this particular slide, we're going to spend a little bit of time, and I'm just going to start at the top and work my way in. So I'm just kind of start at the top and go to the bottom, and then work our way towards the middle. And the rationale is that ultimately what we want to be able to do is focus on how we believe that the Enterprise Command Center can allow a service provider organization to be effective in delivering standardized operation in a shared services model, and effectively allowing our partners and even our enterprise clients to engage with their end customers as a service provider organization. So as we look at the very top box here, we're seeing that there's we just have it simply defined as business units, and the notion being that there are distinctive business entities that are being serviced by the IT operations. And of course, none of us are in business to be able to just be technologists. The idea is that we have end clients that we're servicing, whether they're internal customers whether they may be clients who are distinctive business organizations. We have our initiative is to make sure that their IT infrastructure is functioning. It's allowing them to deliver the kinds of services and business services that their business is all about. So what we've seen though is that as you look at the bottom box, is that for any given organization they have a wide range of technologies that are of course supporting that function. And those technologies may be geographically diverse. They may be dispersed across the country in multiple data centers. They may be represented in regional sites that represent perhaps some kind of a retail operation that may have multiple technologies that are associated with locations again across the country, or perhaps even with international presence. In many cases, what we've seen with some of our enterprise clients is instances in which their growth may take place over time through acquisition. So the implication may be that they have multiple data centers that they've just acquired over time. Point being is that there's a geographical disbursement. Not only that, but we also, of course, see a disbursement in terms of technologies. And so we have come to use references to the different types of technologies, as you see listed here, such as servers and networking devices and storage devices, virtualization, those kinds of things as towers. And the reason is that those various technologies require very specific tools to be able to manage them. And so as we look at this particular, the next box up, we're seeing references to a couple of tools in particular, say for example your SolarWinds for maybe associated with your networking infrastructure and monitoring and managing all the respective components that are important to keep my network at a high level of operation and reliability. Likewise, for the servers, there may be a separate tool. We see a reference here to VMware, and there may be some vCenter console and those kinds of things for managing the virtualization. So those tools, while they provide great services and great insight into the stability of those given technologies, they also help to create that definition, if you will, that delineation that allows our focus to be predominantly in a tower segmented view of the infrastructure. You enhance that by going up to this box up the second from the top box and realize that not only is it the technology types that are the tools, but it's also the skill sets that are required to be able to manage that. And so one of the other things that we have, of course, we have deep layers, right, of engineering resources where they may be somewhat L1 and kind of basic level engineering resources to those who are very senior and have great skill sets and multiple certifications in that particular technology. But again, because of the structure within those organizations, because of the tools that are used, because of the skill sets required, again, we have a tendency to have silos of technologies that are built across servicing organizations that create those boundaries, those definitions. And the challenge with that is that doesn't map well to the end user, the business units at the end, those business entities that we're looking to support, because now those distinctive towers are having to duplicate efforts across multiple lines of business or business entities, and there is very little opportunity for them to engage in a manner that has that reflects correlation, that reflects that there's some kind of interaction between what I'm seeing on the networking side and what we're also seeing in the servers. And maybe if there's a power device that goes down, is it possible that that's going to impact not only the networking infrastructure, but it's also going to affect the servers that are tied to networking infrastructures, and in turn those applications that are sitting on top of those servers. So thusly, we've introduced this concept. We're introducing this concept, and I'm not trying to suggest that it's novel from the standpoint of NetEnrich's perspective, but this whole notion of a command center, or what we're referring to as an enterprise command center. And the idea is that what if we could introduce a layer of not only visibility but also services that allows for a normalization, if you will, of the infrastructure across the board for all of these different technology towers. And if we were to be able to pull together alerts and notifications that are coming from the various distinctive tools that are supporting those towers, what if we were able to pull them together into one unified view that has a common look and feel for all those things? In other words, there's data sets that we can relate to and very rapidly recognize. There are alerts that are associated with various levels of severity that we can very rapidly recognize. There's timestamps and all those critical elements that help us to be able to not only aggregate alerts but also to triage and begin to identify those critical areas. And what if we were able to take not only alerts but also the technologies that those alerts are representing and bring them in together in a view that allows us now to not just see them as siloed towers, but actually allow them to view them in a way that maps to the end user and the business entities that we're, in fact, we're all in business to support. And the whole idea behind the Enterprise Command Center is to provide that integrated view, and we using the term here, the single pane of glass, to be able to deliver that kind of service. This is just a very simple screenshot to give you an idea of what that looks like within the platform. Derek made reference earlier to the combination of not only people but also process and also a unifying technology platform that's really part of the pillars of service for NetEnrich. And in this case, it is a Vistara platform that we're just using the screenshot to just give you some idea of what that normalized view that I was making reference to earlier might look like. And you can see here that there's common sets of data across various technologies that have, again, a common look. It makes it easier for me to have points of reference to understand, even as I move from technology to technology, the critical components, the critical areas of information that I need to know in order to be able to support that particular technology. And then likewise, in this box on the left-hand side, what we're suggesting is that all of those disparate technologies can be pulled together into this one viewing interface. So now I have options to not only have some kind of understanding of the breadth of what we're supporting, but I also have options to be able to take that same infrastructure and organize it in a way that fits, again, those business entities that I'm ultimately supporting, whether that be by region, by geographic site, whether that be by some kind of a logical organizational structure, and it could be by business disciplines, for example, by division, it could be by accounting versus R&D versus marketing, those kinds of organizational structures. And the other thing that allows for me to do is to draw some relationships between the respective technologies and to be able to start to see some correlation between those two. We commonly use a reference to application service mapping in our engagements with our customers. And the whole notion there is let's identify those critical elements that are representative of various technologies. Let's map them together in a way that helps us understand those relationships. And let's give a view that allows us to see those relationships so that I can quickly pinpoint where I may be not only experiencing outage, but also where I may be experiencing some degradation of service across the board as I'm supporting various applications and services on top of those infrastructure components. The next slide, I'm just going to give you a couple of views of some of the kinds of data that's available as we move into this bimodal mode. So there's, as Derek described, the whole notion of doing both things. We have this traditional services that we're addressing, as well as looking for this agile process that we're looking for that tends to be more strategic. Our services and our engagement with our customers tend to follow a very, very similar path. And so you'll see that there's some reflection here of sort of a traditional aspect of being able to support engagement not only with a given technology, but also to be involved, to be engaged with the vendors who are supporting those technologies, and being able to track data points in relationship to that. There's also the ability to take to draw upon relationships between various data points. So in this very simple representation here, we have we're outlining alerts and suggesting that there's the ability to trend alerts over a period of time, which is very useful in and of itself. Making sure that alerts are the appropriate alerts, make sure that the systems are tuned in a way that allows for us to be able to pick up actionable alerts or those that are critical. Making sure that we're paying attention to things like maintenance windows and planned outages, and not again collecting unnecessary bodies of noise, if you will. But the other side of it is when I mentioned actionable alerts, is translating those or converting those into tickets, and what the relationship is between my body of alerts and the number of tickets that I have over a given period of time, and what that ratio, how that ratio sits, and are we satisfied with recognizing that that we're very, very close to being able to say these alerts are very likely to be able, are very likely to be actionable in the form of escalating them to tickets. And the result of that, as we have starred here, is giving us a high level of confidence in making sure that the appropriate parties are notified, and that the organization is notified in a first-to-know fashion. And that first-to-know is coming from the IT operations rather than coming from the end clients, recognizing that there's some kind of they're dissatisfied with the service levels, or if there's some other outage that someone pays attention to. The other aspect about going from in that bimodal mode and moving from a traditional to more towards that agile operation is represented here, and seeing that a third-party organization such as Net Enrich's services can help drive or free up time, give time back, if you will, to engineering resources by taking on remediation activity that commonly would be carried by the engineering staff. And in this particular case, we're suggesting that there are tickets that are resolved by the NOC, which is represented in the blue, and in contrast to those tickets that might be managed by the customer or by the in-house, if you will, IT operations. And then lastly, the idea behind this particular slide is to give the notion that, again, by having pooled together the IT, the infrastructure in a normalized way, and by providing that single pane of glass, what it allows for is to be able to develop some notion of a chargeback model, and this could be delivered by using something along the line of stock keeping units, but it allows for us to be able to quantify the resources and make an association of those resources with a given business unit. And so we've just used the kind of the metaphor here of business unit A and business unit B, but the whole idea is we're breaking down activity, and in this particular case, that activity is defined by the amount of time it took to repair, and tying that back to those respective business units. Lastly, just to give you a quick idea of a case study for a customer that has a publicly traded organization, and you mentioned here a couple $2 billion in revenue. This particular client has multiple lines of business or business units, a half dozen plus, and has grown by acquisition. So their situation is one in which they inherited IT infrastructure just based on each acquisition that became a part of the larger organization. Of course, they didn't acquire those, they didn't make those acquisitions because of the infrastructure. They made the acquisition because those particular business units added a piece to their overall operation that allowed them to grow as a business and allowed them to service their customers. And so the challenge that was in front of the IT operations organization is to be able to make sense. Now they have data centers spread out all over the country. They have retail sites that are spread all over the country, and they have disparate types of technologies for given technology towers. It very well might be that some of the networking gear is common, but at the same time there are various blends of, if not various vendors of different models within that, and various stages of upkeep and those kinds of things. So one of the real challenges that they faced was, how do we make sense of having a big picture view of everything that we've got responsibility for? How do we become more effective in allowing, in communicating to the end user? In this particular case, it's a business unit. The cost of delivering IT services to that particular organization, and how do we make them aware of the fact that we're delivering a high value, high quality, high level of service, and be able to do that in a way that quantifies our activity. And so their response was to put a command center in place, to be able to pull everything together into one unified single pane of glass so they could see everything, but now they could start mapping those individual components within that infrastructure against various lines of business. Derek, I think at this point, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Wes. Here's the benefits of Bimodal IT. These benefits come from over 1,000 clients, including Netflix, Disney, and Kenneth Cole. On the left-hand side, operate traditional IT more effectively, de-risk IT, significant reductions to downtime, and the all-important first to know, at least 95%. You don't have your end users, your store's calling, saying point of sale doesn't work, websites are too slow, etc. I mentioned tool consolidation. Also consolidate your monitoring tools, ITSM, no need to rip and replace. That's for traditional IT, more effective. We mentioned that IT needs to move faster and drive more innovation, starting with the ability to offload mundane tasks, L1, L2, monitoring, reactive work. We can free up to 30 to 40% of your team's bandwidth so they can focus on the right things and do them the right way. We can reduce the shadow, and because of our process of continuous improvement, I mentioned 10 years, 1,000 clients, we built up a pretty big database that tells us ahead of time what might break, and also helps us continually automate additional processes. And ultimately, and Wes hinted at this, what the business is telling IT is, we need you to be our preferred service provider so that we don't have to go outside of IT to solve our technology opportunities. Summary, I started the presentation by stating that IT's at a crossroad. Unprecedented opportunity, unprecedented technology. The question is the glass half full or half empty? There's also tremendous risk with the opportunity because the technology, in some cases, the business can use themselves. IT operations is in the middle of that decision. They're in the critical path, and all the evidence, including Gartner talking to clients, says that IT needs a new approach to how they operate, starting with a new sourcing model around service delivery, including automation and full control to true 360-degree single pane of glass command over the entire environment, including cloud. That is all we do. We've been doing it for 10 years. We appreciate very much the time you just gave us. Thank you.
Derek and Wes, thank you. Great presentation. We have a few questions from our attendees that I'd like to pose to Wes. Wes, how does NetEnrich and Terakai catch first-to-know troubles before clients?
we have there's a couple of things that come into play with our First to Know initiatives, and one is to have the right eyes and ears, if you will, in place for given elements of the technology for the towers that we're managing. So we do deploy a range of technologies, including what we referred to earlier with the Vistara platform, serving as sort of the overarching platform, but we also will integrate with various tool sets, including the ones that we saw on the slides. And part of the initiative is, again, just to make sure that that we're focusing on the right core or key elements that are important to be paying attention to. Part of the cycle of just ongoing engagement is making sure that those the monitors and the rule sets that we use are tuned well and those kinds of things. But in addition to that, it's also very much of a process-related functionality. So our operation is driven by SLAs and commitments to meeting given windows of responses to those things. The platforms allow for us to aggregate alerts. They also allow for a correlation of events in between various technologies. And so as our team reviews those, they will review for validation of those alerts by looking at the correlation, by also looking at the aggregated body of alerts. That allows them to be effective and efficient in making quick decisions about the criticality of a given event. The tool also allows for easy access to things like the means of escalating. So whether or not to whom we need to escalate and the manner in which we need to escalate. So all those things are very much at the ready of the engineer's fingertips as they are working through the process of validation and triage.
Good, thank you. Where and how would a prospect or a customer start to implement this service?
That's a hard question to answer, not knowing anything about the details, and so I'm afraid I'm going to have to fall back on a little bit on it all depends. And part of the reason for my responding that way is that I think the size of the organization, the stage and maturity within the organization, and quite frankly, in many cases, the culture of the organization has an impact on where we start and how we start. And the receptivity to be able to, in many cases, what we see is that and IT operations may be something that's been in place for a long time, and to start making changes to move away from what Derek was describing as traditional to this more agile approach. It does change. It takes a change of mind. It takes some willingness to be able to start adapting to some new procedures and those kinds of things. And so there are really our starting point and the manner in which we start really will be impacted by multiple factors.
Good, thank you. How secure and safe is it, and how do you reach that conclusion?
Well, they would help to have a little bit more detail, but just briefly, the access to the infrastructure is driven through our technology, and our technology is only allowed within the client infrastructure with their agreed upon consent. So we do ask for, in order to be able to have access to that infrastructure, we do ask for inside-out permission through the perimeter of the organization's through the organization's perimeter or firewall, and we do use secure channels of communication. So in other words, we're asking for access through ports like 22 and 443 and 8443, and establishing secure 256-bit encrypted sessions. All of our activity within the given infrastructure is audited, and it's a rather unique feature that's part of the Vistara platform that allows us to be able to capture everything that transpires from the time an engineer accesses a given device to the time he or she exits and closes the session. We actually maintain a recording of everything, so you can see every keystroke, you can see everything that took place on the desktop. And so we do have some mechanisms in place. Our data centers are ISO certified, 27001 certified, and our data centers actually reside in hosted data centers that likewise that have multiple certifications from a security perspective.
Good, thank you. That's obviously very important to everyone from a security perspective. Where did the term bimodal come from, if you happen to know that?
That might be best for Derek to answer, but it is I believe it is a term that Gartner has been promoting.
Okay. I mentioned that many times. The question was, where does bimodal came from? As mentioned, it started out with Gartner a little over a year ago. They've got probably 100 analysts, and 20 or so of the analysts that are talking to IT operations and IT CIOs came to the conclusion that IT was at the crossroads. There was some risk of losing relevance. In fact, their own survey showed that by 2017, they predict that 30% or more of IT operations team will cease to exist and/or face major budget cuts if they don't change how they operate. And that change comes in two forms. At the same time, more effective traditional, and then fast IT, to quote Gartner.
Excellent, thank you. I have one more question. How prevalent is shadow IT, and should companies out there worry about it?
As I also mentioned on shadow IT, the term's been around a few years. It's a different way of saying the business can't wait. They need something done. IT doesn't have the resources. They do it themselves. Gartner's prediction, and I have some friends in big companies, including Cisco and AT&T, that would validate this. In fact, the last time I talked to them, they said, Derek, don't call it shadow anymore. It's going mainstream.
Good, thank you. Okay, that's all the questions. I'd like to let everyone know that every attendee of the seminar will receive a free IT maturity and innovation assessment from Terakai and NetEnrich. We will be sending an email out to you to link you to the assessment, so keep an eye out for it. The assessment will only take a few minutes of your time, and you'll get invaluable insight into your technology infrastructure and how prepared you are to utilize bimodal IT to drive your business initiatives forward. I also would like to remind everyone that we will post an archived version of this presentation on our website in the next few days at terakai.com/webinars. Derek and Wes, thank you again for the presentation, and thank all of you again for attending our webinar today. We look forward to talking with you again soon. Have a great day. Thank you.